Before we get going today, I hope you'll indulge me for a second. And I hope that you will, for 1 minute, take a journey with me. Imagine that it's the year 1760. For those of you who are really excellent at maths, that's about 255 years ago. Now, 255 years ago, something started to happen in the world. We experienced a wave of new technologies, a wave of innovation, and suddenly people's lives began to change. Suddenly, the way people behaved, the way they lived, the way they worked began to change. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the start of the Industrial Revolution. And every single one of us in this room, our lives have been forever changed by what happened 255 years ago. Fast forward 255 years to today, and we stand at the beginning of a new revolution, a digital revolution. And like the Industrial Revolution all those many years ago, it has the potential to do something incredibly amazing for us.
The first issue that I would want to talk about is the issue of the commercialization of the existing broadband network that we are building. Now, generally in provincial government, because of the tough financial times that we are facing, we have an approach when it comes to economic infrastructure, and I think you would know about this because some of you may have attended the Infrastructure Investment Conference that took place in August, or you might have read some of the documentation related to that. You would know that one of the things we are trying to build is an alternative off-budget way of funding infrastructure in the province, so that where we have limitations as a provincial government in our fiscal ability, we can nevertheless continue to maximize our investment in infrastructure. We have set up an institution called the Gauteng Infrastructure Financing Agency. And what we are currently doing is a feasibility study on the commercialization of the broadband network. And what it means is that in the new year, we would be wanting to put into the public domain a call for proposals on the commercialization of the network. Our Premier has spoken about his commitment to building, on the one hand, the township economy, and on the other hand, a significant and viable core of black industrialists. Those of you who would see yourselves as fitting into the category of township entrepreneurs, emergent township entrepreneurs, and those of you who would see yourselves as fitting into the black industrialist category. And we're going to be calling you together at the end of January so we can talk about how you can help us to further develop our supply chain reform.
I'd like to ask our panelist, Mr. Mlambi from Centec, to perhaps share with us a perspective on the challenges of connecting the digital township.
We need to provide for ourselves fixed broadband access to our township areas or to all the areas that we need to connect. And if the infrastructure are required because of the terrain, it demands that we use a different technology, therefore we need to use broadband wireless connectivity. If you have teenagers, for instance, you're traveling to different places, when you land, the first question they ask is there Wi-Fi here? So Wi-Fi has become kind of a lifeblood of communications amongst our young people. A lot of youngsters do YouTube channels nowadays, and some of these channels are quite entertaining and some maybe are not desirable. But as an opportunity for people who are staying out there to take what is in the community and put it online and using whatever channels, but we need connectivity to do so.
You know, it took about 100 years to connect 1 billion places. And it took about 25 years to connect 5 billion people. So if you look on that transformation, it shows you that the digital world is even accelerating much more faster. And then as we look into the future, we're saying we are going to see 50 billion devices connected. In the new digital era, we don't have a demand issue. We have a business model issue. Because as you digitize, you can imagine there's much more higher and higher demand for the services that you are digitizing. But the key thing that we're still faced with, we're still grappling with, and I think that also came up from our presenter a little bit earlier, is how to get the right business model so that there is a win-win.
The second one, which I'll talk about a little bit, is the question of cyber taxes. It's something that's very close to us. In a recent experience we had, is there's something called over-the-top players. So those are people who are multinationals, international companies, who go over infrastructure that we have, like networks that we built, or private companies built like mobile operators, fixed line operators, and then they actually sell services over the top of those without contributing to the investment of building those. And we have some very bad examples of those, and one of those is Netflix. They don't pay content distribution rights for South Africa. They don't pay taxes of the income they generate from here. They don't pay services to Foreign Publication Board that we have to do. So local companies who want to compete in media distribution have to do all of those. Due to the history of South Africa, we have situations where there are quite a few monopolies established, and it makes it very difficult for startups in certain sectors to be successful. Because the moment the startup comes, they're seen as a threat, the big company either buy them or kill them, or become uncompetitive and then make sure that they don't succeed. And I think it's very important that we also have a look at certain of these sectors and make sure we stimulate environments where we know there are monopolies, because it's not in the interest of people. There are many areas for development: website designs, website maintenance, content creation, data manipulation. All of these are areas that we can focus on ICT skills. And then, of course, integration of other people's intellectual property, such as the multinationals as they come in, Microsoft certifications, Cisco certifications, Huawei certifications, those kind of technology transfer that creates high-paying jobs in future.
Within the next 85 years, 4 out of 10 human beings on the planet will come from Africa. I mean, think about that for a second. 4 out of 10 human beings in the planet, 40% of the world's population, will be in Africa within the next 85 years. Now, you start to think about where will the next billion internet users come from? If one tracks the growth rates in populations around the world, it's not difficult to see that the next wave of internet consumers, the next wave of online communities will come from Africa and Asia, of course.
Digital content innovation, all the content that we are used to in many different formats, are converging onto digital platforms. So everything we touch, everything we work with, everything that's stored probably lives in a digital form. And then the glue that holds the hardware and software together is digital. The content and hardware together is digital software. And this all happens in a connected world. So there are these 4 circles that intersect. And the really exciting things, the kind of innovations in the next 50 years will be where those 4 circles meet, where we have new hardware platforms, new content, new software in a connected world, and there'll be an explosion of innovation there. It's possible to go from new ideas and new products to market within weeks or months now. So we've got this rapid innovation, usually very disruptive innovation, and then you've got this truth about the digital world in which everything is multidisciplinary. It's not what anyone holds in their head. It's kind of how you work in collaboration. So that's the kind of life cycle of digital innovation, the fuel that fuels the digital revolution is pizza, bandwidth, and coffee. And you create a space like this, you throw in a lot of caffeine and lots of junk food and great connectivity, and you start to see innovation come out the door. We have to create skills, and a big focus that we've got is in skills development, into upskilling people. And for 10 years, in a partnership between WITS and the city of Joburg, we've actually run a center, the JCSE, Joburg Center for Software Engineering, and we've kind of really focused around kind of running interns, short courses. We do Coach Lab together with the Pretoria Innovation Hub. We are running programs for school kids, and we'll locate all these programs within this precinct.
There was a question this morning about South Africa in terms of the localization and in terms of why do we are an importer of technology. Now, one of the fundamental aspects for any country is to look at its key aspect, and that is research development. And then it's the third component, what we are talking here this morning also, the innovation aspect. Now, this is a graph in terms of the technological achievements index versus the GDP of a country. South Africa is a net importer of technology. And you can see that the graph, how it grew over the last couple of years, and now it's starting to go down. There's a gap between the imports and the imports, and we have to narrow that gap, and that has a huge impact on South Africa's current account. There's a lot of need from a regulatory perspective. How do we open up the bandwidth? I think that is work that needs to be done with ICASA and with the other regulatory bodies, is that if you open up the bandwidth and you're looking in terms of more the research into that, new opportunities such as the application of TV channels, much more TV channels on your mobile devices, education can be much more accessible, etc.
And the point we need to drive home here, and I think what was fairly evident also from the MEC's perspective, is that from a government perspective, the main objective there is to provide the infrastructure. And it's fairly evident given the investment that has been done over the last couple of years and in the future medium-term expenditure framework, that we are serious about investment in infrastructure and making that available. It's also very encouraging to see that the Sustainable Development Goals now include innovation infrastructure as part of a human rights essential. We have no shortage of talent in South Africa. But when you have to go out there and you have to compete with the likes of an Ogilvy, FCB draft in the space of media, marketing and advertising, and you do not have the very same infrastructure to work on and make your work look as good as theirs, you're never going to get the job. The quality comparison will just not match up. So making that type of infrastructure available to the talent that we have is important.
It's clear that our nature is changing in this new digital economy. The very nature, the way we work, the way we live, the way we play is changing. And we're moving into the space where, I think the D in DNA is going to start to stand for digital.